I'm Gene Kuleta, editor of the Latin America Advisor at the Inter-American Dialogue in Washington. On Sunday, April 11th, voters in Peru will select the country's next president, both vice presidents, and all 130 members of the country's Congress. A dozen presidential candidates have entered the race, but according to polls, no candidate has the support of more than 15% of voters, and most are polling in the single digits, making it all but certain that the race will go to a runoff on June 6th. To examine the race and its impact, we're joined by former Peruvian Vice President Mercedes Aráoz, who joins us from Lima. Thanks so much for being with us today, Madam Vice President.
No, Jim, thank you very much.
Now, as we talk about the election coming up on April 11th, as you see it, what are the major issues that are driving this race?
Well, what's going on right now is the issue of the pandemic. It's making many people to not focus in the election race, as a matter of fact. Many people are more, of course, worried about their families and their economy, because the economy is also very much hurt in Peru. So the situation is that people are more focused on that than in the election day. And also because there is a lot of disappointment about politics. The last 5 years have been dramatic, crisis after crisis, and unfortunately also the fact that many of the proposals that the former President Vizcarra presented were also not good for the process of having good elections. So this mixture with the lava jato drama and the political parties have damaged a lot the process. So people have a lot of distrust in politics right now.
Right now, you mentioned the pandemic. Of course, as you know much too well, Peru has been hit so hard during the pandemic with COVID-19, with the infections and deaths in your country. With regard to that, how do you think that's going to affect turnout? Do you think turnout is going to be very low because people just simply don't want to venture outside, don't want to go out and vote and potentially expose themselves to COVID?
According to all these companies that do the surveys and polls in Peru, there is shown the interest of people voting. It's like 85% are saying they're going to go vote. So to vote. So I think it's like, I hope nothing happens in this month that will deter people to go to the polls.
As you mentioned, people are certainly preoccupied with the pandemic. And is it a situation where people don't really know that much about the candidates? Is that the reason that Lescano, for example, only has around 15% maybe of voter support? The others poll in the single digits. Is it just sort of a lack of voters knowing much about the candidates or not being interested in the race? Is that how you see it?
I think the both things. The interest, as I mentioned, is low because they feel that they are disappointed about the politics in Peru. But on the other side is really the fact that we don't have the traditional parties in campaign, and except for a couple of ones, make these people like saying, who are these people? Because, for example, the first one is Johnny Lescano, who is from an old party, Acción Popular, but he was a congressman in the former Congress that was closed by Vizcarra. But he was more like a guy that was making noises all the time in the Congress, but he was not popular, as a matter of fact, sometimes popular because his initiatives were more related with consumer protection and things like that. But he was questioned sometimes. So, but his name is known, and the party is quite known because it's the old party of Belaúnde, who was president of Peru, and Paniagua, who was president of Peru too. More centrist party, but this guy is more in the left of the center, if I would say. Then the other guy who's second in the race is a football player, young guy, very little experience in politics. I mean, he was the mayor of a city, a small city in Lima, a very popular city, but it's a small city in Lima, and is quite young and very famous because he's a football player, handsome guy, but not much about his ideas or what he wants to do. He's selling himself as, I'm different from the old politicians. But what that means? And that's the question everybody is asking. Then there's another guy who's like very in the right side. It's more like very extremist, conservative. He's very conservative and he's very, I mean, the way he presents himself is very aggressive, very religious, and well, he may capture some of these votes because, you know, Peru is a country in which religion is important for the people, but he's in the extreme of the positions of religion, if I would say, in the Catholic, at least in the Catholic Church. So this is at the, then you have the people, Fujimori, which she has lost a lot of popularity. She really wastes all her opportunities with all the damage he made to democracy during the last 5 years. And also because he's involved in these judiciary problems. And then you have the other ones, 20 people, like almost 20 people, 18 right now, that are running for presidency at the same time. So you don't have, they're not talking about ideas or talking about programs. We're talking about figures and people and how much popular they can get. And that's it. So we don't know that much of what they're proposing, and that's what it make us afraid because there is no important signal. They promising a lot of things, but there's no signal of making how they are going to make possible the recollection of taxes or the growth of within the sector so they can recollect taxes, for example. Uh, so it's very, very confusing in the process or in very short time.
Does that give you pause at all that, the candidates seem to be very light on specifics of what they want to do? So is it a feeling that Peruvians are just going into this blind and not really knowing what the candidates stand for? And who knows what that is going to mean when the next president is actually in office?
I will say yes. It's like they're trying to guess what are the ideas. They already presented their plans, the government plans, but their government plans in general are not profound. They don't go into detail. Some of them only presented 5 or 6 pages. It's ridiculous. That's not a government plan. But that's why you have to be very careful about, and people are not reading the government plans. Probably people in the academia like me and others are reading that, but not many are working on seeing how to deal with the proposals. And the proposals are, I will put water everywhere. I will pay you 600 soles a monthly. I mean, from where? Where is the budget that is coming? I'm an economist, so I would say the budget has to be corrected. And we have a problem because all our savings are gone. Some are promoting change in the constitution. That is the more leftist parties that are proposing the change of the model, the economic model of Peru, without saying what to propose. They want more government enterprises. They want more intervention of the government, less private sector. That's the kind of things we have to know.
Right. Now, you mentioned the budget and taxes, some of those fiscal issues. Could you tell me a little bit more about what's at stake in the election? What are the big issues that that could be decided one way or the other, depending on who is ultimately elected? And what are the biggest tasks that are facing the next president of Peru?
Yeah, I think the big problem they will face is that first, we will see a financial crisis. We're seeing a financial crisis coming everywhere in the world, and they are not talking about that. They don't feel the possibilities of inflation rate coming to Peru or something like that, and it's there. It's a risk. Second, we already use most of our reserves that were dedicated to help our people during the pandemic, and there's no extra money. So we have to go back again to the process of having a balanced fiscal situation. It shouldn't be immediately, but you have to have that track because Peru increased its debt last year from 27% to 35%. It's a lot. So we have to be sure that we keep our credit rating so we can have enough resources to keep growing in the future. And there's a problem that these people are not talking. And they're talking, for example, issues against the mining sector. The mining sector is very important to Peru in terms of getting more resources. If we don't have more mines, with all the preoccupation that we should have on having good management or of the environment and the communities that are around the areas of the mine, probably we will have less possibilities of having income coming for the government spending. And we have to manage our programs like health or education to have a better resource management of not only the resources, but also to deliver good things to the people.
The election in Peru is something we're certainly going to keep a close eye on between now and April 11th and after that as well. Although sadly, this is all the time we've got for the moment, but I'm sure we'll be talking to you again in the future, and our readers will be reading your commentaries again. So thank you again, Madam Vice President. Great to have you with us. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
Mercedes Aráoz, former Vice President of Peru, joining us from Lima. I'm Gene Kuleta, editor of the Latin America Advisor at the Inter-American Dialogue in Washington.